So today we're going to dive in with Chris Kirkpatrick, who is an IUL expert. I study his stuff to learn more myself as someone who's out there helping people build for their future, build their guaranteed legacy, live their legacy. I look to Chris for guidance on why or why not an IUL. We're going to compare the IUL to a qualified plan. We're going to show you who's in control of the money, what the variables are, and empower you with the ability to ask yourself better questions, to take that responsibility, and to really understand what is happening with the IUL, like who's in control, who turns the knobs, what does the contract say, compared to what are some alternatives as well. So let's dive in with Chris.
Hey everybody, it's Chris with Life 180. Today's really exciting. I want to talk to you about Index Universal Life as an investment vehicle, how life insurance agents are selling Index Universal Life as an investment vehicle, what they're using it for as an alternative as an investment vehicle, and ultimately why that story doesn't work. Now, let's get into this. First and foremost, when you talk to a life insurance agent when they're selling Index Universal Life, what are they telling you? They're basically, the story is the rich man Roth, right? Like the conversation around the fact that, like, why would you put your money in a 401k? Because 401ks are horrible. And I agree with that sentiment. They are.
Why is Chris talking about this being a rich man Roth? Because the Roth IRA has limits. If you make too much money, over $161,000, you can't contribute. You can only put $6,500 a year. But the first fault we see in what an IUL is presented as is an investment vehicle. It is not. It is life insurance. And so it is tied to the market. So Chris is one of the most brilliant people when it comes to talking about IULs and how you can use specially engineered whole life instead. So we're going to keep watching Chris. We're going to keep learning with him. But just understand, as soon as you start talking about something as an investment vehicle, it's already going away from what it was intended to be to begin with.
Why would you put money in a Roth? Or most people who can't afford or are not allowed to put money into a Roth because they make too much money, this is deemed a rich man's Roth because of everything that goes with it. But here's the deal. If you look at Index Universal Life and you look at the moving parts inside of Index Universal Life, it's really a zero-sum game, the same way that an investment vehicle is a zero-sum game, in the sense that you are investing for accumulation. If you follow any of the content that I create, you understand that I think one of the most important things everybody in this world needs to do is stop investing for accumulation, because you're investing in a zero-sum game that you are not in control of, right? Like what I am talking about is investing for cash flow. That's one of the reasons I'm a big believer in whole life insurance as your financial fortress to store your money inside of and to protect your wealth. And then when you find opportunity, invest in cash flowing assets like real estate or something else that will create cash flow for you, right? When you invest in IUL, the biggest problem that I have with it is that you're really not going outside of the mindset of investing for accumulation. When you're investing for accumulation, it's, especially inside of an Index Universal Life, it's really no different. Like, let's look at the variables. What are the reasons that people don't like a 401k? People don't like a 401k because of the fact that, you're delaying taxes, and when you're delaying taxes inside of a 401k, you're basically delaying till a time when we're going to be paying a higher tax rate. I think everybody in the world right now can look around with half a brain and say, okay, yeah, I think taxes are going up. Our spending is out of control. We're printing more money. We're worried about inflation. At some point in time, we have 100 trillion plus in unfunded liabilities from the country's perspective. And so at some point, we have to pay for those things. And where is that going to come from? It's certainly not going to come from increased revenue from the country. The only way to increase revenue from a country perspective is to make sure that is for the government to increase taxes. And what does that mean? When you put money into a 401k, you're basically putting your money into an account where they have the ability to tax your wealth from you, right? Like that just is what it is. And so it's ultimately, you're putting money into an account where the government can say, okay, if we need more money to pay for to cover the deficit that we have, this is kind of in case of emergency, break open glass kind of scenario. We can always tap into the 401ks. And if you think I'm wrong about that, go look at history. It's been done before. And it will happen again. It's happened in local state pension plans, like in Mississippi. That's the one that comes to top of mind. And it will happen on a national level at some point in time.
Love what Chris is bringing here. He's saying, who's in control of your money? That is the question. Remember, the quality of our life is going to be directly reflected by the quality of our questions and our ability to do two things: take radical ownership and action. And so what he's saying is, don't lock your money up in money prison in a qualified plan, because we don't know what the future of taxes are going to be. We can look at the history, we can look at what's happening, we can look at the lack of discipline by our country as far as fiscal responsibility goes, and with that we know just historically we're at an all-time tax low. That's what he's talking about, the qualified plan. So if you're looking for your IUL to be that same kind of vehicle, it's still tied to the market, and it comes back to the question of who's in control. With a qualified plan, you have a silent partner, Uncle Sam. He is your partner, and he will tell you what the taxes are once you're ready to start taking out those distributions for retirement. It's no different with the IUL. You are tied to the market. It's going to go up, it's going to go down, and the insurance company is in control of that contract. Chris puts out tons of content regarding this. You can go watch more. He is the expert in our space of talking about IULs and how they're failing. I mean, there is right now a class action lawsuit of 66,000 people suing one of the IUL salespeople who's been selling this as the solution. So we're just saying, think about your future. Think about who's in control of the situation, and it is a game about cash flow. Let's go watch some more and see what else Chris has to share with us.
When you look at it from that perspective, this is the same reason I don't like Index Universal Life. People don't like 401ks, and it's funny, the people that sell Index Universal Life are, it's a bit, I'm just going to give them the benefit of the doubt, and if you're watching this and you sell Index Universal Life, I'm going to give you the benefit of the doubt in the sense that you probably haven't thought about it like this. You're selling away from 401ks because of the fact of the taxes, because of the fact of the administrative charges, because of the fact of the unpredictable growth, because of the fact of like all these different things. The government can raise taxes at any point in time, and you're ultimately not in control of the results of the returns inside of that 401k. Well, guess what? The IUL is no different. It's a little different in the sense that, yeah, you're paying taxes up front, so that's not, they're not controlling, but or they can't raise taxes on you down the road. You're going to have tax-free access if you take it through policy loans, so on and so forth. We all know how that works. That's great. But what you're trading is you're going from a tax environment to an environment where the insurance company has control of the moving parts inside of that policy. The same way the government has the ability to up taxes that you're arguing against, the insurance company has the same ability to increase fees, to increase charges, to increase insurance costs, to lower cap rates, to do all these things inside the policy, that it ultimately functions the same way that the government functions with a 401k, right? Now I will say I have a little more trust in an insurance company than I have in the government, but at the end of the day, the biggest problem here is it's still the same kind of moving parts inside of an IUL that are inside of a 401k if you really break down the fundamentals.
So what Chris is talking about is absolutely true. And the question we want to ask ourselves, again, who's in control? Who is in control? One hand, IUL, it's the insurance company. They can change the fees, the rates, the caps, all the things inside the policy per the contract. And on the other side, you have the government. I'm going to say the insurance companies have been around. They're more fiscally responsible, right, than financially responsible than the government. But at the same time, like Chris is pointing out, it's about who's in control.
When it comes to you being able to control your money. And when you're investing for accumulation, the whole reason I don't like accumulation is because, let's say you're 30 years old right now.
Accumulation is scrimping and saving, hoping and praying that one day, someday, you're going to have enough money to live. And we have no idea. You don't have a crystal ball. I don't have a magic wand. We don't know what the future holds. We don't know how much money we're going to need when we retire. And that is a losing battle. Why not live your legacy now? Why not have cash flow and have an intentional life with a game that you're participating in. The one thing that I really want to emphasize here is our mindset. It is our money mindset. It is understanding that to be abundant is to spend money. It is to go out and have your money in motion. You can't lock it up in financial prison hoping that things are going to work out. We want to control the dollars that we have today while they grow simultaneously.
Let's say you're 30 years old right now. If you're investing for like a 30 or 35 year time horizon to get to 60 or 65 when you want to retire, the problem is you're setting yourself up to try to accumulate money. You don't know what the results are going to be inside of that account. The problem is if the IUL doesn't perform, you're probably not going to know whether you're in good shape or bad shape until it's too late to solve the problem. Right? I mean, just think about that. And what happens is if you're not able to solve the problem, or if you don't become aware of the problem fast enough, you're not going to be able to solve the problem, right? And if it takes 20 years in this, because anybody who does IUL and does it right is going to, and when I say right, I use that term loosely, but like comes at it with the right assumptions. Let's say a 5% illustration expectation, option B, increasing death benefit, max funded to the MEC level, stuff of that nature, right? Like if you structure the policy right, you're still looking at like year 15 in the policy before it's really going to start to hum if everything goes well. That's if. So
do you want to be tied to question? Do you want to be tied to an if? That's simple. Do you want to be tied to an if?
If you start right now to get to year, let's say 15 years from now, you're 30 and you get to 45, and if that thing didn't perform the way that you expected or needed it to, now you're in trouble, because to get from 45 to 60, if that's your time horizon, if it didn't work out, now it's going to be really hard for you to make up that difference. Versus if you just said, hey, listen, I'm going to put my money into an asset that I can control, a whole life policy. I can have my money in that policy. It's going to do what it's going to do. I know it's going to be guaranteed. Worst case scenario, once again, I make my decisions. What's the upside? What's the downside? Can I live with the downside? The downside in a whole life policy is that you're going to have a lot more liquidity if you structure the policy properly. Granted, there are a lot of life insurance agents that sell whole life that don't do it properly, especially when you look at some of the career shops out there. They don't do it the right way. A lot of people are exposed with whole life as well as they are with index universal life. But what I will say is that if you structure a whole life policy properly, you use that as a storage vehicle, you buy cash flowing assets inside of the policy, you use the cash flow from that to pay back your loans inside of the policy, never interrupt the compounding, it grows, you increase your collateral capacity as you go.
This is it. This is the magic right here. He's talking about creating your own privatized banking system. He's talking about cutting the government and cutting the insurance company in a way out of the picture. It's about you. It's about you thinking long term and building up enough capital in your system to where you can buy cash flowing assets. You can pay back your policy loans with those assets. You can buy the things in your life and keep all the money, keep all the interest in your life. This is the power of the infinite banking process. It is going ahead and capitalizing your system. Like he mentions, Chris mentions this a lot as well. You got to work with the right people. You got to work with people who know what you're trying to solve, and they understand the power of specially engineered, cash-rich whole life. So let's go back.
And ultimately, at the end of the day, you can increase your cash flow over the years. So it doesn't matter, you're not working for accumulation, you're constantly improving your cash flow. And let's face it, do you care how much money you have, or do you care how much cash flow you have? Cash flow is what we live off. Cash flow is all that matters. I see too many people get to retirement and have a crisis on their hands because they don't have enough money to retire. What they thought they needed doesn't, it ended up not being nearly enough, because you take inflation into account, you take like a bunch of different variables into account. The fact that we have inflation goes up, so it costs more to live. The fact that we have a scenario where interest rate environments are low, so you can't get as much as you used to be able to. Like, let's think about it. If you started retirement planning in the early 90s, they were planning on you being able to get 6 to 8% as good, safe money out of your retirement account when you plan. So,
love this point. I mean, it's the same thing. We don't have a crystal ball. We don't know what's going to happen, and we can't look back at history to tell us what's going to happen. We can look and say, hey, where were taxes in the past and the future? What's the market been doing over time? But the thing we have to understand, we want to embrace change and we want to have control. We all want similar things. We want freedom and control. That's what all Americans are looking for. So what Chris is talking about is saying, hey, how can you create something that's going to give you cash flow, give you control, which is liquidity, is going to give you a guaranteed legacy and help you build for the future. Now IUL, again, there's someone else in control of that. 401ks, the same thing. And we want to be away from the market. We want to be secure. If you want to play in the market, if you want to do trading and all the other things, that's a great way to go ahead and do an investment. But investments are risk. Investments are risk. When we're talking about the specially engineered whole life or just a regular old whole life, it has a lid on it. You can't lose. It's going to grow every single day.
Saving for $1 million back in the 90s, early 90s seemed like a good number because you get to $1 million, you pull 8% out a year, that's $80,000 a year of income, right? But flash forward, 30 years later, $1 million to have the same purchasing power, you need probably $2.5 million to match that purchasing power. So now what do you need? For that same $80,000 that you would have needed to live in 1990, you need about $200,000 today. So in order to pull out today, not only can you not take the 8%, you can take the 4% maybe. I know there are a lot of people saying that you can do different strategies with IULs to get a higher percentage. Once again, it's still a variable that's uncontrolled by you, and there's no guarantee that it's going to get to that point in time, and I would say be very, very cautious about that. So, but the bottom line is you take a smaller percentage of expectation, what you can safely withdraw from any account as well, or take for distributions, and it makes it so people are getting to retirement and they're not even close to ready. They're totally exposed, they're totally at risk, their lifestyle is at risk, and it's one of the things that I just want to encourage you. If you're thinking about getting an index universal life policy, make sure you're really clear on the risks that you're taking. Make sure that you understand what it's going to do for you on the upside. Are you good with the upside? Are you good with the downside? Can you live with the downside if it doesn't go according to plan? Are you still going to be able to meet your retirement needs and not have to take a step backwards in quality of life when you look at the downside of an IUL? Because I promise you they put the downside into those contracts for a reason. So anyway, I hope that helps. If you found value in this video, I'd love it. I'd be so grateful for a like. If you haven't subscribed yet, make sure you hit that subscribe button, click the bell, that way you get notified every single time I put out a new video. And until next video, I hope to see you around and have a blessed, inspirational day. We'll talk to you soon. Later.
Amazing job by Chris Kirkpatrick. Just again, he's always adding so much value and he's teaching so much about IULs. He has deep, deep knowledge of the IULs and how they really work. So he's just saying, be aware, because at the end of the day, like I mentioned earlier, it's really about you taking radical ownership for your future self, and not scrimping and saving, hoping for one day, someday. The questions we want to remember are who's in control of the money, right? Who's benefiting in the situation? And is the money growing tax-free? Do you have access to that money? You want to be able to use the money while it is growing at the same time. This is one of the most powerful parts about the money multiplier method and the concept of infinite banking. So go ahead, like the video, subscribe if you're new here, and click the bell to turn it blue to be alerted for new content. Be blessed. Until next time.